Namaskar and welcome to NatStrat Conversations. My name is Pankaj Saran. We bring you in this series of our episodes insights into geopolitics, technology, economy, and national security. We try to bring you an authentic Indian voice on all these issues. Today, the guest on our show is Mr. Amitabh Kant. Mr. Amitabh Kant is currently the G20 Sherpa for India and led the preparatory process for the successful presidency of the G20 in 2023. Mr. Kant is no stranger. He's had decades of experience as a civil servant, starting from his days in Kerala, and he has led several path-breaking initiatives while in government, including in his role as the CEO of the NITI Aayog. He's a governance reformer and a public policy change agent, and there are many flagship national initiatives that he has actually steered and also created. So, no one better than Mr. Kant to talk to us and to share with us the Indian perspective and the Indian voice on all these issues. He has always been in the thick of action and, as I said, a man of ideas. Thank you so much, Amitabh, for being with us today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Conversations.
Great pleasure. Great pleasure.
It's so nice to have you. So I want to begin by actually congratulating you on what has happened last year in the G20 and your stewardship and how we had the outcome. It's been a busy year. Are you satisfied with what you achieved?
Well, it was very tough. It was like 5 years getting compressed into 1 year. And these were very challenging days because the world was passing through extraordinary times. We've had, vast number of people going below the poverty line, over 100 million people losing their jobs. We've had, a scenario where 95 countries of the world were facing a debt crisis. There was a massive challenge of climate action and climate finance. And in the midst of all this, India was taking over leadership of G20 and extraordinary times in terms of geopolitics because of the challenge on food, fuel and fertilizer.
Correct.
And we were confronted with all these challenges during the course of our G20.
And you pulled it off.
Pulled it off largely because, firstly, because of the stature and the standing of the Prime Minister himself.
True.
Secondly, because he was very clear that India has to be ambitious, it has to be inclusive, it has to be very action-oriented. And secondly, that we must be the voice of the global South. And actually, India's truly, throughout, if you read the New Delhi Leaders' Declaration, has spoken the voice of the global South. And by making African Union a member of G20, we've actually made G20 as G21 and made it far more inclusive than what it ever was. Right. And today, G20 will account for almost about 90% of the global population simply because of the contribution of India in making it far more inclusive.
Correct. Fantastic. So, so much has been written and said about the success of India's presidency and your role. And I don't want to therefore talk more about that. I want to actually use this opportunity to talk to you more about the economy because you have played a critical role in the shaping of so many things. And I want to begin by saying, look, it looks that the tiger is unleashed, that we are in a sweet spot. The statistics are popping out of the charts. The IMF has just said, once again, we are the fastest growing economy in the world. We have record foreign exchange reserves, manageable inflation rates. The Sensex has gone through the 100,000 mark. The manufacturing is doing well. GST collections are up. Digital payments are again going through the roof. We have had huge successes in infrastructure, in the area of logistics, and the area of energy, which I will talk to you about. So it looks as if the Indian economy is on fire. I mean, what are your first thoughts? Is it as you had expected, beyond your expectations? What did we do right? Is it a vindication of everything that you had tried to do over the last few years? So your initial thoughts, and we break into this conversation.
So let's look at the last 3 quarters and India has grown at about 8.4% plus in the last 3 quarters. We are the fifth largest economy in the world, and we will definitely overtake Japan and Germany to be the third largest economy of the world by 2027. And so we moved from being in the fragile five to the top five in a short period of time. And what we've done is to make a quantum jump in several areas. And I would like to elucidate some of them.
Sure, absolutely.
First of which I would put in the category of structural reforms which were carried out. The goods and services tax, which has led to the broadening of the tax base from about 6.5 million to about 15.5 million taxpayers now. Your tax GST is growing at about 18% year on year now. Secondly is to bring a huge amount of credit discipline through the insolvency and bankruptcy code, and which was very critical because you need to allow businesses to also die off in a systematic, sound manner. And thirdly, to my mind, was the Real Estate Regulation Act, because a number of middle-class people were being cheated by real estate builders, and now the RERA ensures that due diligence has been done, and therefore that was critical. But I think the most important of all this was the huge measure taken on ease of doing business. A vast number of rules, regulations, procedures, paperwork have been eliminated. There's been a huge digitization of the Indian economy, but more important than that, about 1,600 laws in India have been scrapped. So that's the structural reform part of it. And second is the huge transformation which India has made in building infrastructure. And the capex spend of the government has moved from about 1% to roughly about 4.5% of the GDP now. And this has been transformational. It could have been two different approaches could have been taken. One was to take a consumer-led approach, and the other was an infrastructure-led approach. Infrastructure approach takes a little more time, but it gives you far greater result. And therefore, the government has been politically very visionary in pursuing an infrastructure-led growth. But what it has led to is very important to say, that we've, in the last 8 to 9 years, we've built about 40 million houses in India. I mean, that's like making a complete Australia. That's more than the population of Australia. And we've actually provided toilets to about 120 million Indians. That's like making a full Germany in India. That's more than Germany's population. And we've provided piped water connection to 253 million Indians, which is like providing piped water connection to the entire population of Brazil. So that's the size and scale of what India has done. And we've also ensured that 30 million households are electrified. And we've ensured that we build about 80,000 kilometers of road. That's the size and scale. 80,000 kilometers of road means that we built India 4 times anew. This is the size and scale of what India has done in terms of infrastructure. So if you see the infrastructure today, Pankaj, that, the quality of our airports, the quality of our roads, many of them, actually we are on better, if not on par with Europe and America today, because this is good quality, top-class infrastructure which has been made in India. The third key issue which is very important to highlight is the quantum technological jump we made in digital infrastructure, and that is we provided identity to everyone. Then between 2015 and 2017, we opened 550 million bank accounts. And we link them up to both the digital identity, that is Aadhaar, and the mobile number, and which enabled Indians to do fast payments. So between today, we do 46% of the real-time fast payments in the world. China is next with about 12%. Last year we did 128 million fast payments in the world. We are a world leader. And then we moved, actually from fast payments, a number of our young startups like MobiQuick, Pine Lab, etc. started doing, providing credit on the basis of payment history. And then a number of our startups like Zerodha, Grow, Upstock, they took stock market to tier 2, tier 3 cities and rural areas, all on the basis of digital identity. And then you had new insurance companies like Go Digit and Acco, who started taking insurance to rural areas and tier 2, tier 3 cities. Yeah. So you are able to do stock markets transaction in 30 seconds. You're able to open a bank account in 30 seconds. You are able to get an insurance in 1 minute on the go, on the mobile. So the cost of transaction in India, your cost of acquisition of a customer has fallen from about $150 to less than $1. Yeah. It's very high in Europe and America because a lot of paperwork is being done there. And, that's why during COVID, we could do 220 million COVID vaccination, all on through an app on the mobile. Correct. No paperwork was involved. Correct. So this has been a technological level jumping which India has done. And therefore this huge structural reforms, the infrastructure story and the digitization story. And there is a fourth story to that, which is the energy transition story, which we can come to. But all these four combined have made India do a massive technological level jumping. And as the Bank of International Settlement has said, India has achieved in 9 years what would have taken India 50 years to achieve.
That's amazing. I mean, that really is. So, I mean, the figures actually speak for themselves in terms of the basic macroeconomic indicators and everything else. And not just what Indians are saying, but the international community and your other agencies are saying. But, there are people who say we should be cautious about premature exuberance. What would you say to that?
Well, Pankaj, the Prime Minister has very rightly said that this is a Amrit Kal period. Mm-hmm. And, we need to keep growing very rapidly at high rates for the next 3 decades till 2047, because we have the demographics favor us. We have a very young population. But for that to happen, we need to constantly carry out reforms. And I think while the central government has done a lot, the next big wave of reforms has to be about bringing in structural reforms, and much of what Government of India has done into various states of India. Yeah. And it can't be that, you need about 12 champion states of India who will keep growing at 10% plus for the next 3 decades and drive India's growth story. So we need Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, all to fire on all cylinders for the next 3 decades. They have to be the next big drivers of growth, to my mind.
Great. No, I'm glad you raised this issue about the role of the states. I mean, you were the pioneer of the Aspirational Districts program at the grassroots level. And we've discussed in other forums about the importance of states and how they contribute to the whole development process. But what would you say to the whole question of regional imbalances between the north and south? And you mentioned a few states. Is that an issue? I mean, how serious is that an issue today for India?
So, first of all, we must understand that we are a very large country. We are bigger than 24 countries of Europe, plus 30,000 kilometers. Secondly, there are, certain states which are coastal states, which have the ports linked to them. Right. And the ports enable you to do a lot of import, export, do value addition and re-export. And therefore, they become very natural destinations for manufacturing. And it's a logical process that coastal states tend to grow much quicker and much faster. The challenge for India is that we need to grow rapidly, but we need to grow in an equitable manner. And you'll always have some states growing, but we are one integrated India. Yeah. And I think what you will see in the next few years is that many other states will catch up. I mean, it's not that when we were doing ease of doing business, the first year Gujarat came number 1. But the next year Andhra beat Gujarat. The third year Telangana beat Gujarat and Andhra. But the good thing was that Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, which were 25th and 26th, they had jumped up to 4th and 5th position. So I think the next few years you will see an unleashing of enterprise, you will see an unleashing of energy, vibrancy and dynamism in many, many other states of India.
Let me also then throw to you other criticisms. So what you have painted is one picture, but there are those who talk about other aspects, the social sector, the softer aspects. Like say, for example, is India's economic growth and success story, is it job friendly? Is it actually translating into jobs for the youth in terms of quality of education available to our children? Also, the whole growth story, some people say that it is K-shaped, that in terms of the fact that inequality is growing, some are getting richer and the vast majority are not benefiting. And, associated with this, somewhat of a damp atmosphere when it comes to private investments. I want you to talk about the other aspects of the economy which I have just mentioned.
So two things. One is that it's very important for India to grow. You can't be distributing. I've worked in Kerala for a very long period of time, and Kerala is a great example of high quality of education, of good health care. But if you don't grow, you'll be distributing poverty everywhere. Yeah. So you need to grow at high rates, if you grow at for 3 decades. Now, India has grown at rates of 8 to 9% in the past for relatively few years of 5 to 6 years. We need to do that for 3 decades. Japan did this post-World War II. Singapore did it, a smaller country like Singapore. Korea did it. Taiwan did it. In recent times, China has done it. And therefore, this is our period to grow. And if you grow for 3 decades period, then you will grow with equity and you will provide jobs for everyone. You can't create jobs without growth. And it's very important to understand this. And I'm a great believer in human development. And I believe that with growth, you will create jobs. But India as a country needs to focus a lot on improving learning outcomes. Both the ASA survey and the NASA survey both demonstrate that learning outcomes need a lot to be improved. But that is because, our focus was on providing access of education for a number of years. So now we've provided access of education, and I think every child is able to go to a school. But in the next decade, I think we must ensure that our learning outcomes must radically improve and we become top class at that. Health outcomes, I see a lot of focus on health because we've, under the Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, we were able to open a large number of primary health and wellness centers. And we've provided about 330 million people health insurance. This has not happened anywhere in the world. That we've been able to provide, the scheme is for 500 million Indians, but we've been able to provide health insurance to 330 million Indians, so that a lot of people who used to get into poverty trap because of lack of health care, we now give insurance to them. So that will have a huge, huge impact. And I think the third big thing is that a huge focus has now been laid on improving nutritional standards.
Yes.
So we are tracking every single pregnant woman in rural areas through an app, and we are able to track her down so that we are able to then take care through our Anganwadis of the pregnant women, and then when she delivers of the child, so that we reduce and eliminate stunting and wasting in this country. Huge, huge focus. And programs like the Aspirational District program, which were meant for, the most backward districts of India. The Prime Minister called them the Aspirational Districts of India because they've laid focus on outcomes. Huge focus on outcomes, created a competition amongst districts, have had a massive impact, have had a huge impact on improving outcomes in both education, health and nutrition.
That's a great example of inclusive growth. But, just to come back to the demographic dividend and the youth, which constitutes the bulk of the Indian population, how do you see the growth policies catering to that particular, isn't that a big primary challenge to ensure that our youth are engaged, they have a stake, they can get a job after education? I mean, isn't that a big thing?
No, you're absolutely right that we are amongst the few countries in the world which will have a huge amount of young people.
Yeah.
We will by 2047 be providing about 30% of the skilled manpower to the world. So you need to actually skill them, and huge focus has been laid on by the new Ministry of Skilling
Yeah.
on providing skilled education. So you'll be providing top class engineers. The challenge, Pankaj, on that is that technology is constantly changing. So we need to constantly upgrade our curriculum. And today, there's a huge shortage of product developers, there's a huge shortage of prompt engineers, there's a huge shortage of data scientists, machine learners, artificial intelligence learners. So our 390 universities, our IITs, our triple IITs, our IIMs also need to constantly evolve in terms of curriculum for what the world requires and what our startup movement requires.
Sure.
Our startup alone today require 1 million product developers, which is very, very critical for the startup movement to grow and expand.
No, I know you're a pioneer. You've written a lot and you've actually led the way. But I want to bring into this conversation this other big debate, and I want your views on this whole debate between manufacturing versus services, between trade and the trade policy and the manufacturing policy. But first, this whole business about whether India should and how much India should focus on manufacturing, how much on services. Would you like to say a few things on what you see as...
So first of all, a large country like India cannot grow on the back of services alone. It's not feasible to grow for 3 decades on the back of services. You need to fire on all cylinders. You need to be a great services country, but you need to be a great manufacturing country to create jobs to the vast number of Indians who are moving from rural areas to urban areas.
Right.
So without large number of manufacturing jobs being created, you cannot provide good quality jobs. And thirdly, you need to do good sustainable urbanization. Well-planned, good sustainable urbanization on the back of public transport is very critical. And fourthly, I feel that the number of people working on agriculture is too high for a country like India. 40% plus population dependent on agriculture means low-paid jobs. And therefore, you need to take population away from agriculture into better paid jobs of manufacturing and sustainable urbanization and enhance agriculture productivity. So you need to increase agriculture productivity, you need to do sound urbanization, you need to do manufacturing, accelerate the pace of manufacturing, and you need to keep growing on services, all 4.
So would you say that the initial trends of the last few years are encouraging from the manufacturing point of view? Because I'm completely with you that no major economy is a strong economy without a strong manufacturing.
Yeah.
So do you think the last few years have shown good indicators with the PLI and all the other schemes?
Yeah, so the production-linked incentive scheme was designed to create big champions in India because our feeling was that if you don't create large champions, they will not be able to penetrate into the global export economy, which is very critical. You need to export to be able to grow at rapid rates. And you need to create big champions, you need to support them for the first few years. So the production-linked incentive was that you go bigger, 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 bigger. 5 years, you keep enhancing your production to global size. And when you do that, you're also creating tier 2, tier 3 manufacturers, tier 4. So there's a backward-forward linkage between the big companies. So India needs about not just few companies, you need 10,000 large companies, and you need about 12 champion states in India for India to continue growing for the next 3 decades. So we need very many large champions of manufacturing.
So how much do you think, with all the reforms and the creation of NITI Aayog and the whole different approach to states, how much have states, the political leaderships and the bureaucracies kind of bought into this new ambitious vision for India? Because at the end of the day, it's just what happens at the state, local, district level, which actually makes a real difference. So, you talked about the coastal states, the hinterland. In your work, how much of this buy-in have you seen from the states?
So I've worked very closely with the states, very, very closely with the states. I was constantly traveling and I see a lot of change in the states. And a number of states have actually championed ease of doing business. A number of states have done better urbanization. If you look at the smart city movement, it's not much talked about, but a lot of phenomenal work has been done on smart cities in India. Really good path-breaking work has been done. And if you look at water management, a number of states have done good work. But I think the next 5 to 10 years, states will have to be in leadership position to drive India's growth story. We need many, many more states to do what the central government has done in the last 10 years. They need to unleash their energies and really take India to another level.
You've also led this whole technology-led kind of growth model, and you have been a fierce and a ferocious or a passionate advocate of electric vehicles, batteries, and everything else, and how to kind of deploy technology for growth. Tell us a little more about how you see this. I mean, obviously there is great success. Is that the next stage of technology for growth?
So, Pankaj, it's very important to understand that in previous cycles of growth, we missed out because we kept focusing on agriculture, we kept focusing on textiles, we kept focusing on food processing. They are important. I mean, I'm not saying they're not important, they're important. But it's very important to understand that job creation and growth happens when you get into new areas, what I call the sunrise areas of growth. And India must become the tech garage of these sunrise areas of growth. And therefore, my belief is that, India's ability to drive electric vehicles, India's ability to be a manufacturer, because if look at this, India is the biggest manufacturer of three-wheelers in the world. We are the second biggest manufacturer of two-wheelers. We are the third biggest manufacturer of buses. We are the fourth biggest manufacturer of four-wheelers in the world. Now, there's disruption taking place. The world is moving to electric vehicles. If we don't do this, we lose leadership position.
No, but here a lot of people say electric vehicles means dependence on China for batteries.
Yeah. So the challenge is that, you have to drive electric vehicles. Lithium, nickel, cobalt in a battery are just about 10 to 11% of the total value add. It's also very important to understand. There is no shortage of lithium in the world. You can source it from anywhere in the world. And not only you can't be dependent on China, you can source it from Australia and many other places.
Latin America,
nickel and cobalt is available. But the important thing is that in a battery, India can do about 80 to 85% of the value addition. The raw materials comprise of only about 15%.
So linked to this, of course, is this whole story we have on energy transition, moving to renewables. So a little bit on that, how we have done, I mean, in terms of our international commitments, but more than that, just for the health of our own people. How have we done on that, and how do you see that as another area of growth and jobs?
So, to my mind, three very transformational things we have done. One is, though we contribute only 1.3% to total greenhouse gas emission right now. Logically, on a percentage basis, we should be entitled to 17.5%. But irrespective of that, we need to be the champion in becoming green. And much like what we've done in the digital technology world, we need to technologically leapfrog. And that is important because the world will go green and you need to become a champion.
Yeah.
So we've done about 187 gigawatt of renewable energy. No other country has done this. And we've been able to do this because we created the ecosystem for that. This tripartite agreement between the central government, the state government, and the RBI enables the private sector to get his repayment back. So this ability of the private sector to attract private capital from abroad and then get repaid for that on supply and build a transparent process for that. And secondly, that India is the only country in the world which has a one grid across the country. Europe doesn't have it. America doesn't have it. So you have one grid. You can be producing renewable in one part of the country and supplying it to a power deficit country, power deficit state. So that's big. But Pankaj, the important thing is that, all the electricity, even if it is converted into renewable, will be 20% of your energy. 20% of your energy. 80% of the energy is imported in India, we import worth 180 billion. And that's used in steel, it's used in cement, it's used in refinery, it's used in fertilizer. And what the Prime Minister has said is that by the time we become 100 in 2047, we should be an exporter of clean energy. And therefore, the government has pushed for this green hydrogen mission. And green hydrogen means that you will be using electricity to crack water and produce green hydrogen. So the challenge for India is to become the biggest producer of green hydrogen, the biggest exporter of hydrogen in its liquid form, ammonia, to the rest of the world, and to become the biggest manufacturer of electrolyzer to the world. I mean, these are challenge, and the challenge is that we should be able to bring down the cost of green hydrogen from $4.5 to $1 per kilogram. And if India is able to do that, we will be the leader of the world in completely new energy, and that's green hydrogen.
That's, actually quite fantastic.
And no other country is the climatic condition to do it other than India.
That includes solar power also.
That is, of course, without
wind and solar.
Yeah,
both.
so, you need solar, you need wind to be able to use renewable to produce green hydrogen.
Yeah.
So you need to go up to about 700, 800 gigawatt of renewable. The Prime Minister's target is 500 gigawatt by 2030. But I think we should accelerate that even more and go up to 750 gigawatt of renewable energy. We have the climatic condition, and we should bring down the cost of renewable. Now that we are manufacturing solar panels in India, we should accelerate the pace of this and actually push for this.
So, from here, a little bit on the linkage between the economy and national security.
Yeah.
And India's positioning in the international global economic order, both in terms of value chains, supply chains, even the traditional aspects of international trade. You just talked about imports. In your experience, do you think there is a greater awareness today in India about the linkage between the economic aspects of our life and the national security aspects? Till now, the traditional wisdom was national security is hard, it is delinked from economy. But I think after COVID, after Ukraine, all these distinctions have been removed somewhat. Can you talk a little bit more from your vantage point about how we have approached this whole issue from a more organic, interdisciplinary manner? And are we on par or ahead of the curve to meet current and future threats, to look at national security from a holistic point of view?
So one thing this Prime Minister has done is to break down silos across departments and to enable officers to think in a multidisciplinary perspective, which is very critical for today's world. That and I've been a long-term believer that your security is actually intrinsically linked with your economic growth. And that is, you will become more and more secure if you keep growing at rapid pace for the next 3 decades. And therefore, there's a direct correlationship between economic growth and your security, to my mind. And if you're an economic powerhouse, it gives you the strength to be able to bring in new technology. Look at what the United States, as a great example, has done. It became a great because of its economic growth for a long period of time, it was able to create national champions, and DARPA worked towards creating great national champions, which were then able to do defense manufacturing. And the drive by the Prime Minister for making India in the defense sector and ensuring that a vast number of critical items are kept apart for domestic manufacturing and encouraging a number of startups through the IDEX movement is really a move towards ensuring that India becomes Atmanirbhar in defense for manufacturing. And when you start doing manufacturing, actually manufacturing will then throw up the best technologies for the country. Actually, all advanced countries, defense manufacturing has driven technological pole vaulting in many areas. And therefore, the drive towards defense manufacturing in India will be the next big driver of India's growth. The defense corridors in UP and Tamil Nadu and the focus on manufacturing domestically will be a very big driver for manufacturing in India. And that will help you to become more and more secure for as a country.
True. So that, I think, combined with adequate focus on the social sector, would you agree, is a valid proposition?
Yeah. So my view is that
I mean, you can't ignore agriculture.
No,
the rest of the
government,
social sectors. Yeah.
the government in the next few years will not only drive growth, but for them, ensuring that learning outcomes and health outcomes, and I think it's very obvious, will be a huge focus on social sectors. And the government has actually laid a lot of focus on agriculture sector. During the COVID period, India was the only country which has actually ensured that direct benefit transfers are given to 800 million Indians. We provide 80 crore Indians with food. So no other country in the world does what India does.
But I think the issue also was of productivity.
Yeah.
And so on.
So I think the focus on enhancing productivity in the agriculture sector, focusing on floriculture, horticulture,
exactly.
dairy, those sectors will grow much faster than the agriculture. And actually for a farmer to get into value-added sectors like this is very critical. He does agriculture, but he also does floriculture, he does horticulture, he does value addition of his crop. And pushing for solar energy in the rural areas should be the next big drive, so that your tractors are all driven by solar energy, and the battery of the tractor can actually be like a substation, giving energy to every household in the village itself.
Yeah, that's a great vision. I want to switch again now. You know, you're probably the unofficial brand ambassador of India. I mean, you have so much to your credit in terms of God's own country and so many other initiatives. How important to you is the whole question of branding?
No, branding is very important, and I think the best brand ambassador of the country is the Prime Minister himself. Nobody does it better than him. So he actually has, India is seen in a different light. It's seen as a very progressive, advanced, technologically savvy country because of PM's own interaction with a number of techies, with a number of startups, the fact that we've been able to become the third largest startup nation in the world, the fact that we are bringing disruption in a range of areas. But branding, to my mind, is very, very critical. It's not just the hard power of the country, it's the soft power of the country. And India has huge strength in terms of its ancient civilization, in terms of its culture, in terms of its heritage sites. And therefore, we need to keep going back to our roots all the time. The reason why I'm saying this is that worldwide, there are 250 nations competing on travel and tourism. And you need to differentiate yourself very differently and very distinctly from other countries. And I think the strength of India lies in the fact that it has huge civilization, it has huge heritage, it has a very distinct culture. And that is what is our soft power, really. That needs to be promoted and branded.
Correct.
And actually given a huge vigor and energy in the next coming years. And linked to that is the fact that the next government, to my mind, will lay a lot of focus on travel and tourism. So you will see a lot of push on tourism, both domestically and internationally. That will be a very big job creator.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a completely untapped potential for the Indian economy. Also a great job creator. Leadership, I mean, you have been in the civil service for many decades. You have occupied different positions. What, in your mind, would be the good attributes of leadership, given the fact that we are a young country? I mean, people are looking for leaders who can influence, who can make a difference. A little bit about that from you.
So Pankaj, first and foremost, that's, from my own experiences.
Yeah, just from your experience.
My experience, I would first of all say that a leader must have very, very strong beliefs. He must have very strong conviction about what he wants to do. He must think ahead of time. He must think 3 decades ahead of time. I mean, and actually, in many ways, the Prime Minister, when he talks about Amrit Kal, is demonstrating leadership of taking India to another era. And therefore, the belief and a long-term vision, and that we need to work on outcomes. So we've defined the outcome where we want to be in our Amrit Kal period and then drive it. So strong belief is very, very important. The second quality which I would say about leader is that he must be able to have a very strong and a very effective team with him, and surround himself by young people with young ideas. So if you must have effective people, you must have young people, you must have young ideas with you all the time, constantly. That's important. So a good team is important. And thirdly, I would say that a good leader must always be optimistic. He must always be positive. He must be able to take a lot of pressure, not pass it on to his team. He must think progressively. He must think in positive terms and be very optimistic, both internally and externally. It's very important to be optimistic. And fourthly, I'm a great believer that a leader today must believe in technology and must actually be a big driver of technological growth. It will not be possible for India to grow at a rapid pace without being a technological driver of growth. That means we must adapt to new technology, whether it's AI, whether it's machine learning, whether it's electric vehicles, whether it's green hydrogen. All these are new areas of growth. They are the ones which will create jobs, but they are the ones who will drive India into 3 decades of growth in the future. And therefore, technological disruption is going to happen. India must take leadership position on that. So a leader must be a very keen absorber and a very keen driver of technological growth. These, to my mind, are a few.
Fantastic. I mean, that's really a very, very concrete. Aspects of leadership, which I'm glad you have put across on the table. My final question to you is that we are in the election season. We will have a new government. If someone were to ask you, what would you say should be, from the economic side, the priorities for the incoming government in terms of how to carry this success forward, and what would be the next few steps? I mean, I don't want to, it's a big subject, but a few ideas about what you think should be the priority areas or which demand immediate attention. I mean, we talked about the headwinds which we face globally, which are a fact of life. It's not easy given the fact that we are on a very ambitious growth path, but we are also confronted with a very adverse kind of external environment. So keeping all that in mind, any thoughts on this?
So my view on that is that we've been having the right kind of strategy. We should need to pursue that more vigorously. We need to ensure that our process of manufacturing gets accelerated, because that will create jobs. We need to ensure that we do sound urbanization, which is very critical. Sustainable, we should not do unplanned urbanization. We need to do planned sustainable urbanization, which is very critical, which will create jobs. We need to ensure that we bring in radical productivity enhancement measures in our agriculture sector, so that we push for greater enhanced productivity in agriculture. But more important than anything else, Pankaj, my view is that the next 5 years we should handhold the states into becoming big champions of growth, because the real big story of growth will come if we are able to create 12 to 13 champions of state. Much like Centre has done, all the reforms must be carried to the states. And if states become big champions of growth, then you need to create 12 champions of growth who will grow at 10% plus for the next 3 decades. That's important. And the last point I want to make is that you are at the cusp of a private sector investment. I don't think, if you look at the investment rate, it's risen, and we are at a very high capacity utilization. And once the private sector investment starts growing, then you will see the acceleration. And then, while during the COVID period, the government has driven infrastructure creation, the next 3 decades, you are good. The bank balance sheets have never been in such good condition. The private sector balance sheets have never been in such good condition. And once the private sector investment kicks in, you will see 3 decades of growth by the private sector investment in this country.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much, Amitabh, for sparing so much of your time. I know how busy you are, and it's not easy to get you. But thanks a lot for spreading, for kind of laying out whole scenario in front of us and also talking about the future. All best wishes to you. It's a pleasure talking to you, and the confidence that you exude is something which is infectious, and I hope listeners will take that as a matter of inspiration for their own work. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great
for
pleasure.
joining us.
Wonderful speaking to you.
Thank you so much.
Great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us in this episode with Mr. Amitabh Kant, India's G20 Sherpa. We will continue to bring you more episodes in the future. Till then, goodbye. Thank you so much and namaskar.